Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The tip of the sword didn't waver, but the heartbeat of the man holding it against his own chest certainly did. "Do it, Cashin," Valerius hissed, his voice rough from 3 days of screaming commands over the roar of a dying battlefield. "If there is a shred of the boy I once knew left in that hollow chest of yours, strike me down. End this mockery before you drag me in chains to your obsidian throne." Rain lashed against the marble balcony of the fallen citadel, mixing with the soot and blood that coated Valerius's silver armor. He was on his knees, not out of submission, but because his legs had finally given out after the siege broke the walls of Oakhaven. Standing over him, silhouetted by the burning skyline of the city, was Emperor Cashin of the Vesperian Empire. He looked nothing like the gentle scholar Valerius had exchanged poetry with during the summer solstice peace summit 10 years ago. Now, Cashin was a god of war clad in black dragon scale armor, his face a mask of terrifying indifference, save for eyes that burned like molten gold. Cashin slowly lowered his blade, the tip scraping against Valerius's gorget with a sound that grated on the soul. He didn't strike. Instead, he leaned down, his gloved hand gripping Valerius's chin, forcing the defeated general to look up into the face of his conqueror and his first love. "Death is a mercy, Valerius." Cashin's voice was a low rumble, vibrating through the rain. "And I have never been a merciful man. You belong to the Empire now. You belong to me." The transition from general of the army to prisoner of the state was a blur of humiliation and silence. Valerius was not thrown into the dungeons, though perhaps he would have preferred the rats and the damp straw. Instead, he was stripped of his armor, washed by silent servants who averted their eyes from his scars, and dressed in silks so fine they felt like cobwebs against his calloused skin. He was confined to the west wing of the imperial palace in Vesperia, a gilded cage overlooking the sprawling capital. It was an insult. This was the wing reserved for concubines, for trophies. For 3 weeks, Valerius paced the room like a caged tiger. Every time the heavy oak doors opened, he expected an executioner. Every time, it was only a servant with a tray of food he refused to touch. The hunger was a sharp, grounding pain that reminded him he was still alive, still fighting, even if his war was over. He spent his nights staring at the moon, tormented by memories. 10 years ago, the world hadn't been divided by fire and blood. Valerius had been a third son of a minor duke, and Cashin had been the overlooked prince of a distant land. They had met in the neutral libraries of the academy. They had debated philosophy, shared wine, and eventually, shared breath in the shadowed alcoves of the archives. Valerius remembered the texture of Cashin's hair, the desperate heat of their first fumble into intimacy, the promise Cashin had whispered against his neck. "No matter what politics demand, I will never hurt you." "Liar," Valerius whispered into the darkness of his luxurious prison. The door creaked open. It wasn't a servant this time. The heavy, rhythmic thud of boots silenced the room. Cashin entered. He had shed his armor for court robes of deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread that caught the candlelight. He looked regal, breathtaking, and utterly detestable. Valerius stopped pacing, turning to face him. He stood tall, despite the bare feet and the flimsy silk robe that left his chest exposed. "Have you come to finish the job? Or does the Emperor enjoy watching his pets starve?" Cashin closed the door behind him, locking it with a heavy click that echoed in the silence. "You haven't eaten in 4 days, Val. Stubbornness does not suit a prisoner." "Do not call me that," Valerius snapped, the nickname tearing at a wound he thought had scabbed over. "That name belonged to a boy who loved you. That boy died when your catapults leveled my city." Cashin walked to the table, pouring 2 glasses of wine with maddening calmness. "Oakhaven was rotting from the inside, Valerius. Your council was corrupt. They were selling your people into indentured servitude to the northern barbarians to pay off their gambling debts. I didn't destroy a city, I cauterized a wound. You slaughtered my men." Valerius lunged. It was foolish, fueled by rage and famine. He had no weapon, no plan, only the burning need to wipe that calm expression off Cashin's face. He aimed a punch at Cashin's jaw, but the Emperor moved with a supernatural speed, catching Valerius's wrist in a grip of iron. Cashin twisted, pinning Valerius against the wall, his body pressing hard against the smaller man's struggling form. I spared every man who surrendered, Cashin growled, his face inches from Valerius's. The scent of sandalwood and rain overwhelmed Valerius's senses, the same scent from 10 years ago. I only killed those foolish enough to stand between me and my prize. Valerius froze, his breath hitching. Prize? Is that all I am? A spoil of war? Cashin's gaze dropped to Valerius's lips, his eyes darkening. The aggression shifted, the air in the room thickening with a different kind of tension. You think I marched an army across the frozen wastes for land? I have enough land. You think I besieged a fortress for gold? My vaults are overflowing. Cashin released Valerius's wrist, but didn't step back. He bracketed Valerius's head with his arms, leaning in until their foreheads touched. I heard the rumors, Val. The council was planning to marry you off to the warlord of the steppes to seal their alliance. They were going to sell you like cattle. Cashin's voice trembled with a suppressed rage that terrified Valerius more than the sword had. I burned the city to ensure there was no one left to sell you. I started a war to stop a wedding. Valerius stared at him, his mind reeling. The warlord of the steppes was a monster known for breaking his spouses for sport. If the rumors were true, you could have sent a message, Valerius whispered, his fight draining out of him. You could have. Would you have believed me? Cashin cut him off. You, the Honorable General Valerius? You would have called it a lie, a trick of the enemy. You would have marched to your doom out of duty. Cashin's hand moved up, cupping Valerius's cheek. His thumb traced the scar that ran down Valerius's jawline. I had to become the villain, Val. It was the only way to keep you alive. And if you must hate me for it, then hate me, as long as you are alive to do it. The complexity of the situation crashed over Valerius. This man, this tyrant, had dismantled a kingdom just to prevent Valerius from suffering. It was madness. It was possessive, toxic, and terrifying. It was the most devoted thing anyone had ever done for him. You are insane, Valerius breathed. I am in love, Cashin corrected. I have been in love since the moment you debated the ethics of power with me in that dusty library. I never stopped. Cashin leaned in, capturing Valerius's lips. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, flavored with 10 years of separation and the metallic tang of unspoken fears. Valerius meant to push him away. He meant to strike him again. But his traitorous hands wound into Cashin's dark hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming a battle for dominance. Cashin groaned low in his throat, lifting Valerius by the waist and pressing him harder against the wall. Valerius wrapped his legs around Cashin's waist, the hunger in his belly replaced by a starving need for touch, for connection, for the fire that only Cashin could ignite. They stumbled toward the bed, a tangle of silk and limbs. When they fell onto the mattress, the dynamics of the war room vanished. Here, there was no emperor and general. There was only Cashin and Val, two souls scarred by time, trying to bridge the gap between them with friction and heat. I should kill you, Valerius gasped as Cashin's lips trailed down his neck, leaving a path of fire. You can try, Cashin murmured against his skin, his hands claiming every inch of Valerius's body. Tomorrow, tonight, you let me worship you. The morning sun filtered through the heavy velvet curtains, casting long beams of light across the disheveled bed. Valerius woke first. He lay still, the weight of Cashin's arm draped over his chest acting as a heavy, warm anchor. The reality of the night before settled in. He had slept with the enemy. He had surrendered to the man who burned his home. But as he looked at Cashin's sleeping face, softened, younger, free of the mask of the emperor, Valerius realized the truth. Oakhaven had been a cage. His duty had been a chain. Cashin had broken the lock, even if he had to blow up the door to do it. Valerius carefully slid out from under Cashin's arm. He walked to the window, looking out at the Vesperian capital. It was vibrant, alive. He heard the rustle of sheets behind him. Leaving. Cashin's voice was rough with sleep. Valerius didn't turn around. Where would I go? My home is Ash. Your home is here, Cashin said, the command returning to his tone. By my side. Not as a prisoner. Not as a concubine. Cashin stood up, walking across the room to stand behind Valerius. He wrapped his arms around the general's waist, resting his chin on Valerius's shoulder. Rule with me, Cashin offered. The Council of Oakhaven is gone. The people need a leader they trust. They trust you. Help me rebuild it. Help me make it better than it was. Valerius leaned back into the embrace, closing his eyes. It was a deal with the devil. It was a betrayal of his past self. But his past self was destined for misery. If I rule with you, Valerius said softly, turning in Cassian's arms to face him. I am not your subject. I am your equal. If you ever make a decision like that again without consulting me, if you ever burn a city to save me, I will run this sword through you myself. Cassian smiled, a genuine, dazzling smile that reminded Valerius of the boy in the library. He took Valerius's hand and kissed the knuckles. I would expect nothing less, my love. The politics would be messy. The courtiers would whisper. The world would call Valerius a traitor and Cassian a tyrant. But as Cassian pulled him in for another kiss, Valerius knew that history is written by the victors. And together, they would write a hell of a story. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Valerius take control of his destiny, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a lover who started a war just to save you? Or is that a red flag too big to ignore? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,